Hello, everyone. We're going to get started with another terrific session. Thank you very much for being here. This one is globally focused, but in many ways it's focused on Asia. And Asia sometimes gets referred to like it's a single country or some sort of entirely uniform region. I've lived in Japan and India for long stretches, and I've worked all over the region for 30 years. And as many of you already know, Asia is a diverse, dynamic collection of countries, peoples, and economies that really just spans the spectrum, from hands down the most technologically advanced manufacturing economies to traditional village-based agriculture, often taking place within the same national borders. When it comes to the energy transition, all regions matter, but none more than this one. The bulk of the energy demand growth to 2050, and likely well beyond that, will come from Asia's younger, rapidly developing economies, especially two potential powerhouses, India and Indonesia. A huge share of the tools we'll deploy worldwide in our pursuit of net zero will come from the mines, processing facilities, and factories in the region, particularly the dominant economy, China, but also Northeast Asia, Japan, and South Korea, and across Southeast Asia. Australia's even in the mix. These include electric vehicles, solar panels, wind turbines, nuclear power, both fusion and fission, you name it. Asia also includes some of the world's largest greenhouse gas emitting countries, but it also remains well behind the US and Europe on a per capita basis in terms of both energy consumption and emissions. At the same time, many countries and communities in Asia are especially vulnerable to the fallout from climate change, which is already wreaking havoc regularly across the region, and I've seen myself in my reporting over the last 2 years there. How the countries of Asia decarbonize their economies, while at the same time continuing to grow them quickly enough to achieve the development goals that their people deserve and desire, that remains and is a central challenge of the global energy transition. And all of this will play out across a profoundly geopolitically sensitive landscape where national security concerns continually shape events, views, and actions. Oh, and it's all intimately and intrinsically linked to some of the most sweeping and rapid technological advances in human history, as we've heard about over the last couple of days. It will matter to everyone on the planet how these countries manage the transformation taking place within their borders, just as they will play an essential global role in propelling the world towards its decarbonization goals. I'm Bill Spindle. I'm a journalist for Cypher, where we cover the energy transition. We've got a great panel today to talk about all these issues and dig into them, and so let's just get started by bringing them up. We have first Ji Zhou, who is the president and CEO of the Energy Foundation, China. We have Russell Tham, the head of emerging markets at Temasek International in Singapore. We have Chikako Matsumoto, who's the managing executive officer and chief sustainability officer at Sumitomo Mitsui Trust Holdings, or SMTH. And we have Tim McCaffery, the global investment director at SCG, which is formerly the Siam Cement Group, now by SCG. So let's just get started talking about some of the different parts of the region and maybe try to get some sense of the overall landscape. Joe, why don't you just talk a little bit? China is the biggest economy in the region and obviously has a global scope. But tell us a little bit about how the energy transition is going in China. It's, here's a country that's producing renewable energy, wind, solar panels, EVs at an absolutely astounding pace, and yet coal use is going up and emissions are still rising. Tell us a little bit about what's happening in China and where the transition stands.
Okay. Okay, thank you. Thank you, for invitation. But for China, I know everybody concerned about China have a very high interest in China. I would say at the top one emitter of carbon dioxide and also top two economy, and also with a growth rate at around 5 to 6% annually. China's dynamics might serve as a determinant for the whole world climate agenda. And talking about the driver behind the scene, I would say, oh, by the way, I used to serve as a negotiator for the Paris Agreement from Chinese delegation. And I can remember at that time, or even earlier, 20 years ago, 10 years ago, I would say the major driver come from international community. Say, oh, you're China, you should do that, you should do that. You should raise your ambition target. So this is the case. This was the case 10 years ago, 20 years ago. But afterwards, I saw some changing. The game is changing within China. So that means, well, we continue to have some, I would say, use the wording. I'm not native English speaker, but I use the wording conservative force. Say, oh, we have to rely on coal, we have to rely on oil and gas. But on the other hand, I saw very rapidly increase of another driving force that come from the solar, wind power, electric vehicle, especially in the past 5 years or even past 3 years. So nobody expected the rapid increase in those fields. But I would also want to highlight the major driver, the private sector. Well, we continue to highlight the importance of public policy, the importance of governmental role. But I would say this is something very unique, very, very new in the history. The private sector, they take lead for enlargement of the penetration of solar panel, battery, the electric vehicle, and they take drive for R&D. So just like here, we said the 3 Ds, discover, development, and then the deployment. So this is something new. We should be aware of that. But certainly coming back to coal, I would say, yes, it's a fact that since 2017, we have seen a rebound of coal. With the corresponding carbon dioxide emission since around 7 years ago. So this is also ongoing now. But another thing is we saw the increase rate become lower and lower. So that means we are approaching to the peak. So this is the general.
Right. Do you see a scenario where so far it's just been additive, right? It's not really a transition. It's just all forms of energy are growing super fast. Mm-hmm. Do you see that shifting? And is there a place where coal use can really recede and still consistent with the kind of economic growth that China wants to see?
Yeah, I can tell you, we can look at the source of the coal, where the coal comes to. One, a residential sector for heating, etc. And another one, industry, no need to say, coking for iron, steel, cement, etc. Mm-hmm. And the third one, the major one, a power sector. By the way, around 60% of the coal come to power sector, and 30% over 30% come to industry.
Right.
And if you look at residential sector, so the major increase of demand for energy is power, right, for heating, right, for building appliances, etc., etc. So, but be careful here. I mentioned increasing demand for power, not necessarily for fossil fuel. Number one. Number two, if we look at industrial sectors, we saw in terms of the market demand for iron, steel, for cement, given the current status of the real estate. So you can see the demand is declining or at the plateau. And that means given the certain technology and the demand for energy, but unfortunately mainly for coal in industrial sector, it is approaching peaking. But for cement, it is going down.
Right.
And then let's look at power sector. I would say the demand for power continue to increase over time. Maybe in the coming 10 years or 20 years, I have no idea. But anyway, so you see the real pressure or driving force to lead to higher energy, I would say this is power rather than, I mean, not necessarily for coal. So, and also not necessarily for oil, given the EV. And so we are very lucky. I mean, the God gave us a very big gift in the past years, that's renewable. And that means you can get the power from renewable rather than coal. And this is the key of the transition. Now we are underway. I mean, to have more and more renewable, solar, wind power, and then now I would say this year or maybe next year, we will cover all the increased demand for power when those renewables.
So the transition's starting in some ways.
That's right.
Yeah.
It's underway.
Chika, you know, Japan is the other big giant economy in the region with really a whole different set of challenges in many ways. The economy's starting to pick up again. They've even been able to raise interest rates a little bit. Tell us a little bit about where Japan's, you know, energy security is obviously a huge concern for Japan. So tell us a little bit about how the transition is progressing there.
Yeah, I'd like to talk about maybe in three areas, starting with the policy environment, and then the how large corporations are really advancing towards the decarbonization, and then what the financial market or the financial institution like us are really doing. First of all, the policy environment, I understand, you know, has been changing a lot. First of all, we have, the government have appropriated with the leadership of the Ministry of Economy, Trade and Industry, the public funding for the decarbonization in the amount of the 130 billion to be deployed over the next 10 years. And just to understand the magnitude of this money, IRA in the US has really revived the industries in the US. And then IRA money is about less than 2% of the US GDP. This 130 billion is about 3% of the Japan's GDP. So this is actually huge for us. So the industries, as well as financial institutions like us, are really looking forward how effectively deploy this public fund to really revive the industry and the economy in the next 10 years. So that's a really big thing. And the also METI, the same ministry, with the leadership, we have right now the public-private sector partnership platform called the Green Transformation, GX. So we have a kind of a collaborative platform really working for including about like 600 large corporations and then financial institutions included. And then we are going to have within the GX platform introduction of the emission trading scheme, and then other new collaboration in the technology and so on. So that's the policy environment we are right now. And we have a financial group, but then we have a trust bank, which is a commercial bank, and then two asset management company. But I'd like to talk a bit more like a kind of a banking side. But our portfolio, we have a portfolio, and we have about 4,000 corporate clients, which covers about the 60% of the public listed companies in Japan. And then since we've been supporting the infrastructure building in Japan, so we have a really high emission industry client in our loan portfolio. So engaging with them, we really what we are really seeing is that they are really I think they are moving from the stage of setting the reduction target for the midterm and then 2050, and then setting the strategy execution plans. And then we see these days lots of collaboration across different industries. And then especially in the areas, what I really see, the area is a kind of a chemical material recycling, in order to build the circular economy, and then the energy storage, and then like hydrogen, ammonia as a fuel, and then also as especially like ammonia as a carrier of hydrogen, for instance, CCUS and nuclear fusion, and then many other like clean tech areas. And then what I'd like to also say here is that in the US and also Europe, there are lots of like kind of clean tech are basically, when you say clean tech, you think of venture companies. That's the same in Japan too, but also in Japan, when you look into large corporations, you see lots of like kind of in-house R&D, new technologies, like chemical, all the heavy industries, and then that's a kind of hidden gems. And then they don't really, and at the early stage, they don't really advertise, what kind of clean techs, they are really developing. So we need to really engage, deeply with those large corporations. But that's, I think, need to be, kind of waiting to be deployed. And then when we engage with the clients with these industries, what they really say is that they know how to R&D new technologies, and then they have also enough internal finance to do that. But then really the challenge is like commercialize these new technologies in the market, having off-takers, and then having additional mobilizing the finance and so on. So in the same way with the venture companies, I think this large corporation in Japan needs a more like kind of a systemic kind of a support and approach to truly deploy new techs, and then kind of get the decarbonization going. So what the financial companies like us are doing is that we have as a bank, we have a daily engagement with the client. For instance, like our relationship managers, they almost kind of contact on a daily basis, if not daily basis, like in a weekly basis. And then usually checking on the financials. But then these days, what they are doing with our leadership, ESG or the decarbonization engagement. So they are trying to kind of find out where are the needs to deploy new technology, what kind of needs to really incorporate new technology into their business. So those are the engagement. And then also it's not enough. So this is something like with the public money rating, we have to really accelerate and then enforce these kind of engagement to find out where the really new technology gems are really hidden to unearth, and then help them really deploy into the real market. So I think that's a kind of a big picture right now, so I'm going to stop here.
Right, so we've looked at China, Japan, two of the big kind of country economic heavyweights in the region, but there's a lot more to Asia, obviously. South Asia and Southeast Asia. Russell, Singapore has always punched above its weight in that area, and tell us a little bit about Singapore's domestic decarbonization plan, but in many ways, I think I was just out at your Gen Zero conference, and it's really clear that Singapore sees this as a huge opportunity to do what it does best in the region, become a hub, become a trading, a distribution point. Tell us a little bit about how Singapore's strategy is linked to the broader Southeast Asia and South Asia regions, as well as China and Japan.
Thank you for inviting me again. So let me start from small to big. Singapore being small, and then see how we can be helpful in the region, Southeast Asia, and maybe within the broader Asia context. Now with that, Singapore is a small place, as I said. We have no source of natural energy, so everything is imported. So that's the context by which Singapore has to think through its energy transition. Now, notwithstanding that fairly severe constraint until we get fusion, we have also committed, like many countries, to a net zero target in 2050. We've introduced carbon pricing into the markets for industries that are emitting beyond a certain intensity. I think next year the price is like $45 and eventually closer to $100 by the end of the decade. There are a lot of policy actions that are coming through. I think the most recent one, given we are aviation hub and yet we want to green the aviation hub, we have also announced a mandatory adoption of sustainable aviation fuel. I think starting from a small base, but as a start, 1% to probably 5% by 2030. Likewise, our ports also going down a similar path, thinking through various decarbonization pathways. On the energy front, because we are 95% thereabouts CCGT, natural gas powered, we have to green that piece too. So we think about how we bring green electrons from our various neighbors. That's one. Interesting factoid is even if you plaster the whole Singapore with PV, roads included, I think about 14%. That's it. So we are constrained in that sense. Now coming back to that, to what opportunities lie for Singapore and the region. Certainly our traditional role as a convener, as a platform within Southeast Asia, Asia, we try to be helpful in this whole energy transition. We think through a couple of things. One, help set standards that can facilitate actions. What I mean by actions, right? Taxonomies are missing, trading standards are missing. How do you define certain standards? In the whole green transition is still a very nascent space, so we are active participation on the global stage to that to help converge that. Second, I think our traditional role as a financial hub in Asia, green financing is certainly something of keen interest for us. So we have been thinking through about capital formation, specifically around green financing and how we convene, catalyze various stacks of the capital, multilateral banks, philanthropic, concessionary capital structures, et cetera, to enable green financing in the region. So we've announced a couple of those stuff. I think recently we announced what we call it stands FASB, some kind of Finance Asia Transition acronyms that help marginally bankable projects get financing,
Right.
or help, and I can elaborate later about how you help coal plants retire earlier. Once you're planted, they run for 50, 60, 70 years.
Yeah, I want to ask more about that.
So that's one area. Coming back to the region, like you alluded earlier, Southeast Asia, it's heterogeneous to the extreme. So in my head, I have this 3D grid, right, of a matrix. One vertical is the various sectors that needs decarbonization. If you follow Bill's definition, there are 5 of them. Then on another axis is really a function of how advanced the economy is and whether it's net energy positive organically or you need to import energy. Then next combination is middle income, then poorer countries, same plus energy, minus energy. Then there are 4 intervention verticals, right? One is obviously policy. 2 is adoption, which is tied closely to green premium. 1 is innovation, and what's the innovation capacity along all these vectors. And finally, capital formation. Then you look at each country where they stack. So that's a bit of a framework I use for deconstruction. Now, on that note, I think, fundamentally, you can't solve the global climate crisis without solving Asia. That's clear, I think, as you alluded to. The current run rate is, I think, close to 55% of greenhouse emissions comes from Asia. Now, at the same time, what other challenges we deal with? In this day and age, I think energy resilience, energy security has come to the forefront. So for most governments, in the short term, that is actually in the medium and long term, that is actually a very, very high priority. Notwithstanding, this climate transition is a very, very critical consideration. Third, in the minds of policymakers, how do you bring along the lower income countries for the transition? And this is where that capital formation to support some of these countries are critical. Similarly, within societies, there are those who can afford to pay a green premium and those that can't. And in Asia, you look at the policy side, it's very interesting. You have countries that price carbon, you have countries that subsidize fossil fuel. not because they want to do it, but the poorer segments of society still need some help. So this dichotomy is going on perpetually. So for Asia's transition is absolutely necessary, yet a complex one. As you can tell, I think you alluded earlier, I think China's buildup of PV is the largest, the fastest in the world, and in the same breath, it's also the most number of coal plants being built. I think same can be said of India, right? So there's this duality that pulls at each other perpetually. So navigating this, I think, is quite critical.
Yeah, all right. Talk more about the coal challenge. But so we've looked at a lot of the countries, and often when we think of Asia, governments play a big role in economies. But I think sometimes it gets underestimated is the role that private companies play as really dynamic actors within that framework, even in places like China. But I wanted to bring Tim in here to talk a little bit about your company and the ways you're pursuing the decarbonization within the company, but also how you see it as a big economic opportunity.
Yeah, thanks, Bill. So as we mentioned in the beginning, SCG shortened our name to, or CM Cement Group shortened the name to SCG because we do a lot more than just cement. So we have a cement building materials group that does everything from cement to tile to rooftop solar and EV charging. We have a packaging group, a chemicals group, a clean energy group, and a life sciences group. And so we operate in many different ecosystems. We have a big playground for decarbonization, and that's one of our opportunities and challenges. So as you mentioned, we view it as a opportunity for growth, which is why we started a clean energy business that is deploying rooftop, ground mount, floating solar for power purchase agreements throughout Southeast Asia. Each of the countries within Southeast Asia has its own different set of challenges based on GDP per capita, how much investment can go in certain areas. So that represents an overall set of challenges that we navigate with our businesses. The net target for SCG is to be carbon neutral by 2050, and to do that we have to invest in technology to bring into the region. So we look at how we can bring technology in and then deploy it within our group or scale it up and deploy it within Southeast Asia and globally. So one example, which was a company that announced a big opportunity in Europe yesterday, is Rondo. We invested in Rondo. We are manufacturing the brick for Rondo with our SRIC, a CM refractory business. And we can use Rondo units to decarbonize our cement, packaging, and chemicals business. As well, our clean energy group is selling Rondo units throughout the region. So we've hit multiple sections with just one company. And so that's how we viewed it, as a way to bring technology in. We look through the region. We've looked in China, we look in Singapore, and in Japan for companies. The challenge on the technology side within Southeast Asia is that China's big and has its own ecosystem developed. Japan has its own ecosystem that works inside of Japan. Singapore is small enough that the entrepreneurs in Singapore recognize that they can't just be in Singapore. But we found that, given the government policies and other things in place in the US and Europe, that's where we find the strongest investments in technologies that we can easily bring into our region. But we do look throughout the Asia region. So, our group, we work alongside the business. So the business has a roadmap to get to net zero. And then we fill in with disruptive technologies that will come into place in the next 5+ years to help accelerate that road to net zero.
Interesting. So if we wanted to look at some energy sources, some technologies, I kind of break them up into the challenges and the opportunities. We've talked a little bit about coal, but coal's a really complicated problem in Asia, or challenge. We've talked a bit about the first challenge, which is how do you just begin slowing down building new coal plants? China's adding coal plants, India's adding coal plants, Indonesia's adding coal plants. We've talked about a little of that, and that's a thorny problem. But an even thornier, difficult problem is the problem of existing coal. Asia has the youngest coal fleet, and Southeast Asia has the youngest of the youngest coal fleets. In some cases, I just recently visited a project in the Philippines that was built as recently as 2015, and then Singapore has been involved with the Rockefeller Foundation and some others in trying to, and the company itself, that has now decided it needs to phase that coal plant out already earlier in its lifetime. And that was only built less than 10 years ago. Russell, talk a little bit about some of that challenge and how difficult that's proving to be and what possibilities there are for trying to sort of reduce that coal. And then, Joe, after that, I'd like you to talk a little bit about where sort of existing coal could wind up in China. My sense is there's a move towards, eventually it can be used as just a peaker fuel almost, which is not really what's happened elsewhere. But Russell, first tell us a little bit about the big challenge.
Yeah, so I think at Temasek and also Singapore at large, I think we've been, as I said, thinking through this green financing strategy. And obviously coal, I think coal is like 30% of Asia's total emission, at least at the current run rate, and I don't think it has peaked, if I recall. So once you build a coal plant, it runs 50, 60 years. So we have been working with other stakeholders on the global stage to put together a program that allows early coal plant retirements. So how do you build a capital stack that can absorb some degree of financial disincentive, so to speak? Second, create mechanisms by which you can crowd in more capital. So there was a two-pronged track. We have philanthropists, multilateral banks, I would call it lead capital from players like Temasek to seed this kind of financing structure. At the same time, you need, in parallel, a credit mechanism. So I think there's discussion around transition credits by which if you retire your coal plants earlier than your original projects, the concept of carbon avoidance has been kind of applied to this kind of coal plants. So there's two projects which we are piloting in Philippines to that effect. And if it proves to be workable, obviously scalable across the region.
Right.
So I think these are the things I think we're thinking about to help move the ball along. Yeah.
And Tim and Joe, this also seems like a possibility or a potential opportunity for you guys too, because if you're going to phase out coal early, Asia's energy demand is growing super rapidly. You can't just take stuff offline without replacing them, and that seems like an opportunity for you guys for like solar panels. China as well has a huge solar panel manufacturing possibility.
Yeah, I mean, we're looking at how to fill the gap on energy supply through solar. We're also, the other part of the coal story is coal's use in cement production. So we are looking at phasing out coal through the introduction of biomass and RDF. One of the challenges with biomass is getting enough biomass sourced regionally and brought to a cement plant. But within, I think, about 200 kilometers of cement plants, we are taking that step. That has two benefits. One is it reduces the air pollution from farmers burning the fields, although there is a cultural aspect of the farmers expect a better crop yield through burning the fields. So, you know, coal plays a role in both electricity production and in cement production. And so looking at how to to reduce coal through both of those lenses are areas that our group is taking.
Right. And coal in China, could it be a peaker fuel at the end of the day?
Yes.
As a transitional state, at least?
Transitional, but we should distinguish different category of coal. I mean, in terms of stock and the incremental part. For incremental part, I think, number one, we should do our best to stop additional or incremental investment of coal power plants right now, from today. But to do so, we need, simultaneously, we need to support renewable to make that the most stable, adequate supply, and the cheaper cost, including energy storage, including the grid, et cetera, et cetera. I mean, we call it the systematic cost of renewable. And this is happening. Finally, I would say, if we can get cheaper and cheaper renewable, this is the major driving force to stop coal. And for stock of the current available coal capacity, number one, we should set up a time frame to phase out. We cannot phase out in one night. But how many years you need? 5 years, 10 year or 20 year. And this is related to the life span of current generators. Normally, in average, we have another, let's see, around 14 to 15 years for the current. And then we can arrange the retirement, in order. So, for example, you can decline the generation hours. So, as a fundamental role, and also to change the role of current coal generator from the base load to, for example, flexibility adjuster. In that way, but certainly you should also take care of the job issue. Many workers.
I was just going to ask about this. So this is the other sticky problem of the overall thorny problem of
we
coal.
We call it just transition.
Right.
Especially targeting at the exporting provinces like Shanxi province in Mongolia. So they have a lot of coal mining and a lot of workers. But we need to develop some solution, province by province, city by city.
Right. And I was going to ask Chika as well. Japan has been involved in the just energy transition partnerships that have grown out of both the COP and the G7. You've been, I think, Japan's been involved in the one in Indonesia, and that's been difficult, right?
Yes, I think for the Indonesia and in Vietnam, there's a JETP program, and that's also a really challenge, for us to really solve together. But if I can bring it back to Japan, if you can. We also have a coal-fired power plant. We are like Germany. We have about over 140 coal-firing power plants. But then the government policy, if I'm correct, Mr. Kobayashi, the champion of decarbonization of METI, can correct me from the floor. But I think in Japan, the average age of the plant is, I think, around 20 years. And then in the whole Asia, it's much younger, like 15 years or so on. But then the coal power plant can be used for 45 to 50 years. So when you think about that, it's very expensive to shut it down at that, a young age. In Europe, the average age is, if I understand correctly, is 35 to 40. In the US, even longer, around 40 years old. So the cost associated with shutting down the coal-fired power plant is different according to the region, and that needs to be taken into account. And then in Japan, we have about 16 to 18% of the energy mix is by the coal firing power plant. And then the inefficient power plant will be shut down. But then we have a kind of super efficient coal power plant, which would be, I think, according to the plan, to be using the ammonia as a coal firing. And then right now, JERA, one of the power plant, is having a kind of a real size demonstration project with 20% of co-firing with the ammonia. And that would this demonstration would end sometime this summer, so we'll see what happens.
Yeah, and that's a hydrogen derivative, so that really brings you to the opportunity side of a lot of this stuff.
Yeah. So I think if we can really reduce the CO2, and I think that is a way of also transitioning this difficult problem.
And your sense is where we are with that is really at a pilot project stage. We're waiting this year, next year, to sort of see whether these ammonia co-firing projects work, whether it seems like the opportunity, and then we sort of need buyers to step up.
Yeah, I think it's right now, JERA is doing with their real scale plant. So with 20% co-firing. And then I think the plan is kind of increase this co-firing up to 40 to 50 in the near future.
Right. The other interesting big opportunity that's gotten quite a bit of discussion here is nuclear. We've heard, I think, a growing sense that sort of firm, large-scale power is just going to be absolutely critical. So I wanted to get some sense, both Chika and Joe, from where nuclear stands. China's is probably building more nuclear plants than anybody else by a long shot at the moment. Where does nuclear fit in?
That's the fact. Now, by my knowledge, there have been several dozen reactors under construction in China, but mainly along coastal area. For the moment, it had not been opened for the approval to build a new nuclear inland. And then in some very specific, very high energy intensive provinces like Guangdong province, and maybe also Shandong, I mean coastal area, Zhejiang and Shanghai or Jiangsu provinces. There have been several, several dozen reactors there. But in average, I think it's also quite lower than the international average.
Right.
And then we saw the nuclear roles, especially serving as a base load for those very energy intensive area. And also, we saw, along with the increase of income, it will become more and more affordable. I mean, to have nuclear as part of them. And some academic scenario have shown a higher and higher share of coal in the coming 20 or 30 years.
Chika, Japan has one of the larger stocks of offline nuclear right now. Do you feel comfortable, or give us a sense of where that bringing some of that back online is?
Right. I think since 2011, more than half of the nuclear power plants were shut down, and then slowly, especially in the West Japan, nuclear power plants were revived. So in the west of Japan, we have less issue of a kind of a stable supply of electricity. While in the east of Japan, where Fukushima is, and where we had explosion and so on, it has been very. Also, the decision making about the power plant, revival and so on, is not at the central government level. It's at the local government, and then also without the consent from the immediate local community. It wouldn't happen. So it's really a local community-driven thing. So most of the, still like in the east side of Japan, we still have many power plants still not working yet.
Right. Russell, were you going to add something? Do you want to?
Yeah, I think even countries like Singapore, which is obviously very small, can't not think about nuclear. So for Temasek, as a state-owned investment firm that operates on a commercial basis, we have also invested along the whole chain. So we've done fusion, some of them that are well-known names. We've invested, taken a stake in Westinghouse that maintains and operates a lot of nuclear plants in the advanced economies. And we're thinking through various other scenarios. Today, you hear a lot of discussion around SMRs, etc. So those are possibilities we're thinking about. But as we are doing some work, the minimum exclusion zone is still, 25 kilometers radius? That's like most of Singapore, so it's a bit tricky.
Right.
Yeah, but nevertheless, I think it's getting very safe these days, but you need like 999s or 49s behind it,
SMR is a potential solution for decarbonization of chemicals. That size of plant can fit, you need about 100 megawatts for a chemicals plant. So we are...
Yeah, Tim, I mean, a lot of this, everything we're talking about basically requires a massive infrastructure build out across the region. You guys can't do that yourself. But what do you need to do the kinds of businesses you want to do and take advantage of the opportunities you want to do? What do you need governments to do, the World Bank to do, others to do to build an infrastructure that you guys can feed your good work into?
Yeah, well, it depends on the country. In Thailand, the EGAT, the Energy Generation Authority of Thailand, has up to now not put renewables onto the grid. So there isn't a market to trade renewables through virtual power purchase agreements or other things. So that's one of the challenges with deploying some technologies, is you have to co-locate the storage with the solar. And then the project finance becomes a bit challenging. So we are looking at how we can work across all of those stakeholders in this system to be able to support the technology deployment.
I wanted to ask about trade. That's obviously going to be a big part of this. China's deeply involved in that with the U.S. and Europe and across all these sectors. How do you think that's going to shape China's approach to all this and broadly the world's energy transition?
I would start from the two very fundamental concepts around the trade. That's competition and collaboration. So do not forget what's the purpose of competition. What I mean by fair competition. So essentially, we have three objectives to achieve for competition. Number one, lower cost. Number two, higher quality. Number three, better service. So, and then these can serve as the criteria to examine if the competition is a healthy competition or a non-healthy competition. If the competition go to some other way with higher cost, with lower quality, better worse service, this is not a good competition anyway. So then I think different parties, we should work together to further to develop the rules, including IP protection, etc., etc., and also the legal basis in different regions to ensure the fair competition. And that said, we can examine the current policy instruments, including tariff. So certainly, essentially, we say, oh, tariff should serve as a tool to protect domestic policy for their domestic enterprises for their competition capacity. But if you look at the history in the past 1 or 2 decades, so in top 20 solar panel companies in the world, top 20 EV, maybe 10 years ago, for some countries, your company, you can have 2 or 3 or even 5 companies from your country in the list of top 20. But after implementing the tariff for 10 years or 20 years, you see no company from your country, in the top 20. And then you should reconsider, if this policy, tariff policy works or doesn't work for protect your company. So this is one thing. And another thing is, I do feel, on one hand, we should take care of climate agenda, climate urgency, to maximize the deployment of renewable electric vehicles all over the world, given the target, tripling renewable and doubling efficiency agreed by COP28. And that means for all the economies, especially the major economies, they should maximize the deployment. Yeah. And then, so we can, in the meanwhile, we should also take care of about the political economy, job opportunity, the local fiscal revenue, and then can we consider another business model? Say to use the FDI, direct investment, for example, from BYD, China, to Germany, to Hungary, to some other country. In that form, local people, they can enjoy more opportunity, job opportunity in more fiscal revenue, and the investor, BYD, for example, they can continue to make money. Right. So if this can be a fungibility.
Yeah, and I think it would be a real tragedy if at the end of the day, whatever consolidation is going to take place wound up taking place by taking production offline at a time when the world just so desperately needs all of these different technologies. I'm curious whether there's a role for you to in sort of finance and blended finance solutions, because a lot of this stuff could go into Africa, developing Southeast Asia, those areas, but they don't have the ability to buy even super cheap products, super inexpensive products, and they don't have anything resembling the grid structure and the charging networks that would be needed to do it. So are there solutions that, if the money could be brought in either through blended finance or something and solve some of those infrastructure challenges, that some of these products could find their way and address those issues?
So maybe articulate that perspective from Temasek. We have been fairly aggressive or leaned into investing in the climate transition. First, similar to the SCG group, we invest in a host of climate technologies, from green cement, green steel, fusion, nuclear support, green computing, food, etc. So we do all those stuff. We also invest across various maturity stacks. So that whole piece is going, how to be catalytic and then try and kind of initially scale up a range of emerging climate technologies. Second, to your point, we build up platforms that can crowd in more capital. So we've set up joint ventures with BlackRock we call Decarb. We have partnered closely with Breakthrough Energy across multiple facets, and then so on and so forth. So we have one whole track going on there. Now, I think one area that is maybe less apparent, Temasek owns quite a bit of companies that are Singapore-based, and they represent a substantial portion of the Singapore economy. And we have put in place what we call a climate transition readiness framework, by which we work with and encourage our portfolio companies to operate within that framework to ensure that they are well ahead of the energy transition curve. So, and I think we employ like 5 to 7% of the workforce in Singapore. So it's a lead. We try and lead the Singapore economy in that sense. A lot of global multinationals are very progressive, so that combination, I think, is very helpful. The last one, a bit to your point, how to create carbon markets that can crowd in more funding. So we have set up trading platforms, blended finance, et cetera, et cetera. So the role of investors insofar as driving the green premium down to make it affordable doesn't have a single silver bullet. You invest in early stage technology, you partner with people who can scale with you, you crowd in capital, you set standards, you price carbon, and the whole thing comes together. And I think then the chances are better to enable this transition. Ultimately, there's for poorer segments of society, less developed economies, they cannot pay the green premium. That's for sure. And if you hear this team here, Bill is all about driving the green premium down, and it's a multifaceted effort. So that's how I look at it. And by the time it reaches like maybe continents like Africa, the green premium should have essentially vanished. That's the goal. Yeah.
Do you want to add anything, Chika?
I like to just kind of touch on this industrial policies and the trade issues, because like, as you mentioned that, industrial policies are becoming very important. Look at the US with the IRA has done, EU's with the CBAM, and Japan also has a kind of a big funding program starting. So I think that global economy and trade has moving into a new regime of industry policy driven, as opposed to free trade. Because I'm old enough to remember when the Japanese government or the Japan has been was criticized utilizing a really heavy like an industry policy to strengthen the companies and then enhancing trade back in 70s, 80s, up to 90s. And then back then, in the industry policies are evil. Right now, everybody is really pushing for industry policy for the decarbonization economy. But then, to what extent, can we really employ industry policy and then protect your own economy, pursuing the decarbonization, and then also kind of securing, like, securing energy security and so on. I think that's something like we need to discuss at this stage at the global level, because otherwise I think, we're gonna go to really chaos, and then like, competition like kind of starts.
Tim, net, wrap us up here. Just give from on the ground the challenges are enormous in Asia. The opportunities are huge. Net, do you feel like things are falling into place and things are really picking up pace now?
Yeah, I think for the next 10 years, we see the opportunity to bring a lot of technologies in, and whether that's tandem PV solar panels to SMR or fusion, these things can really impact the overall carbon decarbonization landscape. And if the governments, universities, banks, and corporates and startups all work together, then we have a good shot.
All right, we'll leave it there. Thanks very much for a great discussion. Let's give him a hand. Thank you.